Hi, my name is Jonathan Tran, and today I will be answering some questions regarding some data analysis concepts. The first being what the CRISP DM methodology for data mining entails and what a data analyst might do in each step. The first step would be business understanding, where we are analyzing the data and setting a quantifiable goal that can be measured. The next step would be data understanding, in which we gather the data and check for any quality issues, such as errors, missing data, inconsistencies, and at the same time calculate descriptive stats such as mean, max, min, mode. The next step would be data preparation, in which we're cleaning the data and documenting how it was resolved, and deriving any necessary data from the data that we selected. The step after that would be modeling, in which we create a model using a combination of logic and algorithms so that we can apply it to the data set and reach the goal of the project. What we'll do in this step is design a test plan for the model and execute it to develop the prototype model. The next step, evaluation. We're assessing whether the prototype model meets the business requirements that we set at the beginning of the methodology and have the output validated by subject matter experts and further testing. Once tested, we'll create visualizations to support the output and double check all these prior steps before we continue to see if anything was missed. The next step and last step would be deployment, in which we deploy the model that was tested and monitor the outputs daily and continue to optimize the model as necessary. The next question asks what needs to be done before you can forecast a time series. In other words, what does time series analysis involve? So for time series analysis, we need to determine the type of time series we're looking at. Stationary, autocorrelation, and seasonality are all factors that we need to consider when looking at a time series analysis. Once we determine the types of time series data we're looking at, we can determine the type of forecasting would be appropriate, such as simple moving average versus weighted moving average for non-stationary time series. Next, we were asked to discuss the main principles of data ethics, as well as what companies or organizations could do to uphold these principles. The first of these principles being privacy, which is the idea that individuals should have total control of their personal data. This means that organizations must let people decide whether or not they can collect the data, and typically this is done through a terms of service agreement when the user signs up for the service. The next principle being transparency, in which the individual should have a clear understanding of the data being collected and used by the organizations. And for this, organizations must be clear, for example, in their terms of service, what data is being collected and where they plan to use it or share it. The next principle being accountability, which is the idea that organizations are responsible for the data that they collect and share. For this, organizations must make a concerted effort to make sure that the customer data is collected safely and securely and kept away from improper access, or they will face strict repercussions. The last principle would be equality, which is the idea that organizations should not discriminate or disadvantage against individuals or groups when handling and processing data. For this, organizations must not intentionally or unintentionally harm or exclude vulnerable and marginalized groups from data-driven processes. The next question involves a scenario in which you're an analyst at a financial services company and you have some concerns about bias in the way a predictive model was measuring things. The question asks how you would raise your concerns with the manager and any suggestions you might have to avoid these measurement biases in the future. So when raising these concerns to the manager, I would first double check what should be the laid out and clear method of measurement, and to make sure that I do think there are biases within the measurement. Next, I would let the manager know my concerns with the biases and have him check with the analyst responsible for the model to see if there's any ways we could rethink the process for the measurement. Next, to avoid these potential biases in the future, I would make sure that there are multiple measuring devices and that the method for measurement is clearly laid out. Another thing that we need to do is make sure the validators have adequate levels of experience and training to make sure that they can correctly identify what the model output is. The last question is to explain the difference between a regression and a classification model in predictive analysis, and when you would use one model over the other. So a regression model is a model used to measure the relationship between two quantifiable variables, and that is used to create a predictive model. For example, when we're trying to predict the price of oil based on historical data. A classification model, on the other hand, is used to predict what category an entity might fall under based on a set of predetermined features. For example, predicting which customers are likely to default on a loan or not.